This video was brought to you by CuriosityStream. Designed by Apple in California, assembled in China. That's what you'll find etched on almost all Apple products, and it really goes to highlight how interlinked the two are. For decades now, Apple has experienced massive growth, and that's in part due to their impressive designs and marketing out of California. But it's also partly because of the high quality and, importantly, cheap manufacturing offered by China. Today, though, this relationship is more fraught than ever. With the world shifting, Apple has found its greatest asset beginning to look like a fundamental flaw. So let's uncover Apple's China problem. Take a look at this graph. It shows us what proportion of Apple's products are made in China. Lowest are AirPods, with only about half of Apple's headphones being made in China. But from there though, prepare for a big leap, with the iPhone, iPad and Apple Watch all predominantly manufactured in China. And that doesn't even compare to Macs, which are basically exclusively made within China. This isn't a new phenomenon either. Apple's been leaning on China for manufacturing since basically the beginning of the millennium, and since its debut in 2007, the iPhone has almost exclusively been made in China. In fact, more specifically, a huge percentage of iPhones are made right here, an area of Zhengzhou nicknamed iPhone City. And that nickname isn't even really a joke. An estimated 350,000 people live here, working 6 days a week to produce about half of the world's iPhones, at a rate of 500,000 phones a day, or 350 phones a minute. Clearly then, Apple has invested hard in China. But why? Well, there are three major reasons that we ought to discuss: cost, proximity, and the Chinese government. Cost is very important to Apple. In the West, the iPhone can often feel like a dominant device, but globally, the iPhone is far from the biggest, with iOS devices only accounting for about 27% of global smartphones. One place they do stand out though is profit margins. Android manufacturers might be able to outsell Apple, but thanks to the iPhone's rock-bottom production costs and high brand value, they're able to benefit from a massive profit margin of over 40% across the business. This means that while other manufacturers ship more phones, Apple earns far more from doing so. And this is in large part thanks to iPhone City. This scale of production in a country with relatively low labor costs really brings down costs. Producing this volume of phones using the same components and assembling them in the same place brings with it huge economies of scale, vastly reducing the price per device. Not only that, but Apple have a real skill for reusing old components in newer, lower-spec devices, allowing them to, for example, continue selling the same crappy webcam on MacBooks year after year, and therefore pushing down component prices lower and lower. But in China, Apple hasn't just been able to build scale thanks to their cheap and vast labor pool. They've also been able to benefit from physical proximity to other manufacturers. In fact, one Apple manufacturer maybe put this best, remarking that the entire supply chain is in China now. You need 1,000 rubber gaskets? That's the factory next door. You need 1 million screws? That's the factory a block away. You need that screw to be made a little bit different? It will take 3 hours. Now, China has invested to make this possible too. They've pushed citizens towards the kind of expertise and training necessary for them to become the default factory for the world. In fact, Apple's CEO even said something similar, remarking that you can take every tool and die maker in the United States and probably put them in a room that we're currently sitting in. In China, you would have multiple football fields. Being in China then gives Apple a big leg up. They're able to pull on a huge pool of people with specialized skills, and thanks to the labor market, they didn't have to pay them that much. Add to that, iPhone City has attracted other suppliers to move in nearby, leading to the extra efficiencies that come with being neighbors to your suppliers. That's no accident either. Like I said earlier, the Chinese government has encouraged these kinds of skills within their workforce, but they've also actively provided companies like Apple with assistance. For example, the New York Times reported that in the first 2 years of the iPhone City's life, the company that run the plant, Foxconn, received bonuses worth $56 million to not only bankroll the project, but encourage further production. The Chinese government has also actively helped to find them more staff, with only last month the government encouraging veterans and Communist Party members to work at iPhone factories in order to fill labour shortfalls. So Apple's focus in China makes sense, right? The country is pretty uniquely able to produce intricate technological products at scale and at a high standard. They benefit from proximity to other companies operating there already, and the Chinese government has actively helped Apple to grow there. The thing is, this relationship is looking less stable than ever. Firstly, China's zero COVID policy has seriously hurt Apple. With strict COVID lockdowns only beginning to go away now, productivity in the country isn't quite what it once was. In fact, in November, we saw a semi-violent uprising at iPhone City as staff who'd been locked down, apparently without adequate food or information, rose up in protest. Now, this is clearly a bad PR move for Apple, but it's also hurt their bottom line more directly, with production of the new iPhone 14 Pro falling behind schedule, and forecasts from early this year predicting a shortfall of 6 million devices. These delays and production issues are so bad, in fact, that Apple was even forced to warn investors about it in a recent investor call, something that Apple and other businesses are always reluctant to do unless they have to. It's not just the Chinese COVID policy which has made life harder for Apple, though. The country as a whole has been getting less friendly. For decades, China's focus was on economic growth. Great news for Apple. But recent remarks from the country's leader, Xi Jinping, have made clear his ambition to decouple too. At the CCP's party congress in autumn, Xi made clear that the economy was no longer their only concern, emphasizing that security issues and the party's ideological viewpoints would now take prominence over business concerns. And sentiment is similar across the Pacific too. Since the election of Donald Trump, politicians across the political spectrum have become increasingly skeptical of China, especially when it comes to tech. In October, America banned US persons from working for some Chinese chip makers, with some speculating that the US government even intentionally torpedoed a deal between Apple and YMTC, a Chinese chip maker. America is also more open to sanctions than ever, with numerous sanction packages being levied against Chinese manufacturing. This tense mood in Washington and the deteriorating relationship between China and the US has to make Apple nervous. A company whose growth over the last couple of decades is, at least in part, thanks to their ability to ride the waves of both nations. This all leaves Apple in a very difficult spot. They benefited massively from Chinese production, but choppy waters make that future look a lot less certain. Equally though, they can't afford to give up on China. Supply chain issues and rising costs have already constrained Apple's supply and forced them to raise prices. Therefore, choosing to move their massive manufacturing machine during a time like this would prove even more costly, especially for a company somewhat reliant on subsidies from the Chinese government, which other nations aren't able to afford or even inclined to offer. Now, to be fair, Apple does have some serious plans to scale back their relationship with China. This decoupling can already be seen with AirPods, which since their launch have always focused production in Vietnam. Going forward, that's only going to continue, with the share of AirPods produced in China expected to fall to about a third by 2025. Data from JP Morgan Chase suggests that the same is true for Apple's other products too, with the iPhone, iPad, and Apple Watch's production all falling to about 80% Chinese, with major pushes towards India and Vietnam. Now, this clearly is progress, but it's slow. Admittedly, 2025 isn't that far away, but with Apple still producing a huge majority of their products in China by the middle of the decade, it's hard to see them weaning themselves off China all that quickly. This data also obscures another difficult truth for Apple, because while the location of production might be shifting, the control of production is much slower to adjust. Take AirPods as an example. Already, 50% of the headphones are manufactured outside of China, and that's expected to fall to a third, which is good, right? Well, the problem for Apple is that according to The Economist, these earbuds are made by Luxshare and Gore-Tex, both of which are Chinese companies. So while production is moving out of China geographically, the companies producing them are still very much within China. The same is true across the board too, because while the location of production might be shifting out of China, the companies actually making Apple's products are looking increasingly Chinese. Now, that might not be a big problem for Apple. It doesn't look likely that Chinese companies manufacturing outside of China will be hit by US sanctions anytime soon. But it's not impossible. As suspicions grow, rightly or wrongly, about Chinese-produced technology, even a symbolic shift out of the country might not be enough to solve Apple's China problem. Apple's not alone here either. Loads of other businesses also have issues with China. In fact, one billionaire probably has an even bigger problem than them, with Elon Musk forced to balance his proclaimed desire for free speech on Twitter with the fact that Tesla manufactures a huge chunk of their vehicles in China. If you want to learn more about that and the potential conflicts of interest at play, we have another video on that topic coming out next year. So be sure to ring the bell and subscribe so that you don't miss a thing. Or if you'd rather not wait, that video is available right now only on Nebula. Now, you probably heard me talk about Nebula before, but there's a big sale on right now, so if you've ever considered signing up, now is the time. Essentially though, Nebula is the streaming service we built with a bunch of our creator friends. Over there, we've posted a load of exclusive full-length TLDR videos which will never come to YouTube. But you'll also find our normal videos early and ad-free there too. As I said, it's not just us either. There's tons of other amazing creators there too, which makes it astonishing that you can get all of this exclusive and ad-free content for less than $1 a month. Think about that for a second. Normally, people sell you stuff as being less than a cup of coffee, but this is less than a bottle of water and a fraction of what other streaming services are charging. Services which don't even directly support independent creators. Now, this crazy good offer is only available right now and is only possible through the Nebula Curiosity Stream bundle. Essentially, if you sign up for Curiosity Stream for the incredibly low price of $11.59 a year, then you'll get access to Nebula as well for as long as you're a member. That's right, 2 streaming services for less than $1 a month. And Curiosity Stream is awesome. It contains an absolute boatload of high-quality documentaries on all kinds of topics that I know TLDR viewers will love. So if you want both services for less than $1 a month, then the link is down below. And if you've ever considered signing up to support TLDR, then now's the cheapest time to do so.